Hey everyone, today we're going to be ranking all 30 of the current killers in Dead by Daylight. For this list, I'm going to rank the killers worst to best with all the player base in mind. A list for everyone, I hope. And these are just my thoughts, of course, and although I have consulted others for this ranking for a more balanced opinion, thoughts will vary. Be sure to drop your own down below. Let's get into it. In number 30 we have the Clown. The Clown, in my opinion, is currently the weakest character in the game, having very little in his favour, particularly with the current maps and general state of the game. Clown's power is his bottles. You have a pink bottle and a yellow bottle. Pink will slow down survivor movement by 15%, and impair survivor vision, causing them to scream, and will stop them from fast vaulting. This is largely effective for shutting down loops quickly, slowing survivors who choose to keep themselves contained within loops. Weakness comes in the form of them being limited to 4 in number, and the cloud only lingering for 10 seconds. A typical counter for this, for a survivor, is to pre-drop pallets or leave the loop for another, which are both quite effective. Clown's second bottle option, his yellow bottles, create a cloud a couple seconds after landing, it briefly remaining white and shifting to yellow when in effect. The yellow cloud boosts the movement of anyone who enters it by 10% and can cleanse the effects of the pink cloud. This is ideally used for quicker movement when traversing the map, or for helping you to reach hooks faster. There is overlap with these two effects, both aiming to reduce time spent on loops, and with them both taking up the same bottle space, the yellow bottles are largely worthless. Clown lacks map control, the ability to pressure multiple survivors, and even his strength, which is his anti-loop, and focus chase, isn't that great, and can be countered quite easily. In number 29 we have the Knight. The Knight is a character with a heavy reliance on AI, with him essentially not having a power he has direct control over. One of Knight's biggest issues currently, in fact, is that his guards are quite inconsistent, and plainly, not that strong. Relying on something that is inconsistent and you can't control isn't reliable. On the majority of maps, a survivor can outrun them, and typically do so with little issue. The Knight's power is his ability to spawn guards. There are 3 guard types that cycle through, each having unique effects. The Carnifex can break faster and hunt longer, the Assassin moves faster and applies deep wounds when hitting a survivor, and the Jailer moves faster and has a larger detection range and patrol length. You summon the guards by drawing a path. This is the route the guards will follow, and if a survivor moves within their detection range whilst doing so, they will enter a chase. The guards can be countered the same way as killers, by vaulting windows, dropping pallets, although they will go through these, and by running through the standard, which looks like a flag. This will give the survivor endurance and haste, allowing them to escape easily, and it will also end the hunt. The Carnifex will hunt for 24 seconds when entered into a chase, and the other 2 will hunt for 12 seconds. Guards can also do things like break pallets or destroy generators, however they cannot apply perk effects when doing so, making these actions largely worthless. This all sounds great, but this is the entirety of your power. Things like herding survivors can be difficult due to the reliance on AI, and the fact that survivors can outrun the guards quite easily. Once your guard is placed, you're now a regular killer with nothing available to you, and this is the main factor in why the Knight is weak as of now. This and his power relying significantly on bots, essentially. He lacks map control, he lacks the ability to move quickly in any way, and even his chase game is very weak. It's only from the occasional times when you can get a hit with one of the guards, and be pressuring another survivor yourself, where the Knight can seem kinda viable. In number 28 we have the Onryō. Sadako is another character I think often gets underrated a lot of the time. She is by no means the strongest character in the game, but she does have at least some support with her kit, which is why she's a little higher here. Sadako will have the option between being manifested and demanifested. While manifested, she performs like a regular killer. When demanifested, she is undetectable and will phase in and out of visibility, and is completely invisible beyond 24 meters from survivors. Her main power is her ability to teleport between different TVs placed around the map, which she needs to be demanifested to do. Teleporting close to a survivor will cause their condemned meter to go up. Once this has reached 7 bars, bars, you are able to mori the survivor. Although you cannot see these bars, you will only have a vague idea, and you'll only know once they are fully condemned. Survivors can lower their meter by removing tapes from TVs and moving them elsewhere. You can increase the survivor's condemned meter when you teleport to a TV and they are close, and they'll also gain it from holding tapes. It's best to try and utilize your teleport as much as possible to make the most of condemned, to try and force survivors to interact with the TVs. Although currently this is quite an underwhelming mechanic. Her clearest strength, I think, is that she can get almost anywhere on the map in a timely manner, and this allows her to often get initial hits quite efficiently when paired with her stealth. Her weakness comes in the form of her very weak chase, and her manifest ability having little power in chase situations. She's strong at appearing, getting a hit, and then moving on, which is why anti-heal perks are ideal, and are effective with her style of play. In number 27 we have the Trapper. The Trapper is a character that has been considered weak for quite a while, and often considered the weakest. However, I think he's actually pretty okay at the moment, at least compared to some other characters. He mainly benefits from having some pretty decent add-ons, and a far more refined power than before. Even on big maps, you stand a much better chance, as it feels like skill can make up for Trapper's downsides quite significantly. With that said, Trapper has quite a steep learning curve, I think, although an easy entry level. Trapper's one and only ability is his bear traps. You start out with 2 traps at base. These traps, when stepped on by survivors, will stop them and give you time to reach their position. Survivors can find traps and disarm them with a short animation. When this happens, you will be notified with a loud noise notification. They have some time to make some attempts to try and escape. Traps will damage for 1 health state, but with certain add-ons, you can alter this to cause insta-downs. You can also do lots of other useful things. Trapper has solid add-ons. His main strength is his ability to hold down loops, particularly strong ones like Shack, and also in general to hold down a set area. You definitely can't hold the whole map with Trapper, but you can hold a good portion of it quite well. You just have to be careful to not overextend yourself. His main weakness is his requirement to place the traps yourself, which takes a lot of time and thought. As spots vary from map to map too, this can be a tricky thing to pick up. Equally though, more simple traps like ones on pallets or windows are still largely effective with Trapper. Trapper at the very least is capable of holding down an area quite well, and tougher loops aren't nearly as much of an issue for him. In number 26 we have the Shape. Myers is largely carried by the fact that his add-ons are quite powerful, and can be immensely game-changing depending on what is used, and how you decide to use them. Shape's main power is his Stalk. This ability has 3 tiers, each tier powering you up. Tier 1 you are slow, with a short lunge, but no terror radius. Tier 2, you perform like a regular killer, but with a smaller than usual terror radius. Tier 3, you can insta-down, have a regular sized terror radius and lunge, and a faster vault speed. Myers has a slow start, but can be very strong once powered up, and a flow is built. His add-ons allow for powerful things like moriing people out of the game and infinite tier 3, or infinite insta-down. Myers is a character newer players in particular struggle with facing, due to the many variations of his kit, and the different type of counterplay with the stalking through add-ons, but also the insta-down aspect of his power, which is fairly easy to attain and utilize well. If you stalk a singular survivor too much, you will not be able to stalk them more. Myers is slow, requires build-up, and is fairly add-on dependent, but he can perform well on most maps, and generally cause a lot of panic within a team. He has more available to him when it comes to map control too, with him having sort of a passive map presence due to his stealth and stalking gameplay. You keep everyone on edge most of the time. In number 25 we have the Cannibal. Bubba is a character that to me has been knocked down quite a few spots by the current maps, and particularly with many having odd feeling collision and shapes on the loops and structures. Bubba's core power is clumsy and mostly imprecise, making most maps for him average at best. Bubba's power is his chainsaw sweep. This is the only thing he has available in his kit. The ability has you sweep your chainsaws side to side and insta-down anyone who enters its path. When revving the chainsaw, you are slowed briefly, and when sweeping, your movement speed is slightly faster. You can extend your sweep multiple times with the chainsaw's charges, allowing choice over how long you sweep for. If you collide with an object during your sweep, you will enter a tantrum for a short time, where you swing your chainsaw wildly and can barely move. Therefore, he isn't so great I find, with this very long cooldown if you miss, and varying success at hitting in the first place. Bubba is primarily a character whose main strength is his ability to camp, and to deal with multiple survivors in close proximity at once. Thing is, this will probably rarely happen. Although Bubba is maybe one of the best campers in the game, to me that doesn't qualify him as good. He lacks map control, his add-ons are pretty awful, he has no way to quickly get around the map to check on gens and such, and his actual chase power is very clumsy and just doesn't work too well with a lot of the current maps. With that said, he can insta-down, and there's times when his power will be very effective, and also break pallets quite effectively. In number 24 we have the Wraith. Wraith is a character who I think has always been very solid, and he's a little higher here for me than some of the other characters, because I think he has the benefit of simplicity. He's not the flashiest of characters, but he is efficient and simple to learn. His power is his bell. When the bell is rung, you become cloaked. When cloaked, you move faster, are near invisible, and are invisible when a survivor is more than 20 meters away. You also have no terror radius, the downside being you can't do damage. Once uncloaked, you gain a small speed boost, which allows you to gain ground and catch a survivor. Wraith's strengths, again, lie in his simplicity. He excels at being able to shut down loops quickly, and is able to catch up despite things like exhaustion perks. His main weakness is his lack of map control, but this can be somewhat overcome with certain add-ons and perks. He can't be everywhere at once, but he can get to places pretty quickly. In number 23 we have the Pig. Pig is a complicated character with a lot available to her, and honestly, she's pretty underrated. The main difficulty with Pig I find is gaining initial pressure. Once you have that pressure though, you gain a lot of slowdown with your reverse bear traps. Speaking of, that's her power, reverse bear traps. These traps are placed onto survivors in the dying state. They activate after the next generator is completed. Once active, the survivors have a limited time to remove the trap before it activates and they die. Traps are removed by searching jigsaw boxes around the map, and the box they have to search to remove the trap is random. This aspect of Pig is great, as it's basically free slowdown, and forces survivors to go deal with their trap before they move on, and if they do decide to move on, then their trap activates, and then they have to go get it off. It's a win-win for you once that trap is on. Her secondary ability is her crouch, which makes you undetectable, removing your terror radius. When crouched, you can use your ambush attack, an attack that will dash you forward at high speeds, catching survivors off guard. When using this, you will make a roar sound though, notifying the survivor briefly of your presence. The attack can be used here and there to get hits, but the main benefit of her crouch is the stealth gained, and allowing you to get close to survivors before chase is started. There are a few tricks you can do with ambush though, like crouching down mid-loop, and growling to try and push the survivor away. Pig's main downside is her requirement to get that initial pressure going, and then making the most of the time where survivors are trapped, which can definitely be tricky. Overall though, Pig is solid. In number 22 we have the Nightmare. Freddy is currently in quite a boring spot when it comes to gameplay, but that doesn't mean he's not good. He's actually fairly, just about, kind of average. He's okay. The main difference between Freddy and a lot of lower characters here is that he kind of gets the advantage of quite a powerful teleport ability, and this makes many maps far less of a strain to play, and you can retain far more pressure. Freddy's primary ability is his snares. You get 5, and when survivors are in the dream world, if stepped on, the snares will slow them down, making it a solid ability to shut down loops, and generally make catch-up easier. You can put survivors in the dream world by hitting them, otherwise they will naturally enter it after 60 seconds. When in the dream world, survivors will become oblivious, and hear a lullaby instead of your terror radius. This is great for passive pressure, with it being fairly disorienting for survivors. Finally, you have your teleport. This recharges over time, and will recharge quicker with survivors in the dream world. It allows you to teleport to any incomplete gens, and is an amazing pressure tool, and map traversal tool. He also has his dream palettes available through add-ons, but we don't need to cover those too much. They exist, they can work now and then and catch people off guard. Freddy's strengths are his ease of use, his consistent passive pressure with the dream world, and the solid utility of his teleport, his main weakness being the mildly annoying slowdowns when placing snares. They do help out on loops, but sometimes it can take a bit longer than you expect. In number 21 we have the Trickster. Trickster is still pretty good. He excels at quickly downing individual survivors, and can do so often in seconds if you're efficient. His throwing knives are very oppressive and hard to dodge. They are his main power. You get 44, and it takes 6 knives to damage for a health state. You can reload at lockers. Over time you'll build up the main event ability, where you can rapid fire knives in a flurry, without a limit. Trickster is quite a simple character, and mastering his knives is the main thing for him. He is weakened by larger maps, due to his slow speed and his need to be fairly close when in chase. He excels on maps with tight areas and low wall loops. His add-ons are solid too. He is an amazing chase character, but lacks greatly in areas of map control, traversal, and his pressure is reliant on how fast he can down people. He's very much a momentum building character, but when you build that momentum, he can be very deadly. In number 20 we have the Ghostface. Ghosty has gotten a little stronger since his rework. He now has a much more reliable set of add-ons, and consistency to his power. Ghosty excels at getting the jump on survivors, with what is debatably the best stealth power in the game. Ghosty's power is his Night Shroud. When active, he becomes undetectable, and he can both crouch and lean, making his main ability, his Stalk, far easier. Stalking survivors causes them to become exposed, and takes a few seconds. The closer you are, the better. You have to be careful though, with survivors able to break you out of Night Shroud if they see you and look at you for long enough. When a survivor is marked, or exposed, they are unable to break you out of Night Shroud, and are a one-hit down. A common strategy is to 99 the stalk bar, get close, and quickly end a chase. Ghosty can do well on most maps, although he can struggle here and there for some larger ones. His core strength is his pairing of insta-down and stealth, and his quicker mobility than someone like Myers. His main weakness is being able to maintain pressure while still being sneaky, which can admittedly be tricky. Sometimes you can go for a bit too much stealth, and you can lose a bit of footing. In 19 we have the Legion. Legion are a fairly standard character, who are pretty solid at most things. They have a singular ability, however they are able to use it for most aspects of gameplay. It acts as a tool to traverse the map, a tool to apply pressure, and a tool to cause slowdown to the game. Their power is Feral Frenzy. When in Frenzy, you move slightly faster, and you can vault pallets. And when you hit a survivor, you put them into the deep wound state. For each survivor you hit, you gain an additional boost to your movement speed, and reset your timer on Feral Frenzy, the deep wound status forcing survivors to mend. After your first hit, you'll also have survivors in your terror radius, revealed with Killer Instinct. If all 4 survivors are hit, the 5th hit will instantly down a survivor, although this doesn't happen too often, particularly as most teams will spread out when facing the Legion. This power is great for applying pressure and slow down instantly, as you're pretty much forcing the survivors to heal, and the extra movement speed is just a great tool for moving around the map. When Feral Frenzy ends, you will get a short stun animation. If you miss a swing whilst in Feral Frenzy, you will also be kicked out of your power. Legion's main weaknesses are larger maps, which can be tricky with their power sometimes running out before the next survivor can be reached. Survivors who decide to spread out can also be harder to pressure. Legion is a character though, where pressure is easy to apply, with the main difficulty coming after that, in using the power for chases, and finding opportunities to get downs and hooks where possible, mainly using the power for things like catch-up, or quickly moving through loops. In number 18 we have the Doctor. The Doctor is fairly underrated I think, and is actually a fairly strong character, with a lot in his kit that can deny loops, help him find survivors, and generally just cause slowdown and disruption. His power is his shock attack. This ability, when it hits survivors, stops them from doing actions of any kind for a brief period of time. It's particularly useful for anti-loop. being able to block pallet drops and window vaults, although they can be a little hard to time. When you shock, the electricity has to move across the ground before it hits the survivor, so the timing is a little tricky. Shocks also apply the madness status, which will cause things such as hallucinations of the Doctor, fake pallets, and a distorting sound. Further, things like difficult skill checks. All of these can be adjusted based on which add-ons you choose to use. The higher the madness, the more potent the effect. At tier 3, survivors will have actions permanently blocked, making them unable to work on generators or save a teammate. However, they can still drop pallets and vault. They will have to pause and snap out of it to reduce their tier, making this a pretty effective slowdown too. You also have a secondary ability, which is a large shock attack, which will shock everything in your terror radius. It's primarily a tool to locate survivors, with them screaming if affected, and revealing their position. Doctor's kit is pretty great. It's especially great if you can learn to time the shocks well, and keep a continual stream of shocks, as madness acts as a helpful passive slowdown. Doctor's main weakness, I think, is probably just things like survivors pre-dropping, but this can be overcome with perks like brutal strength, to help you shred through the pallets and keep up chase. Doctor is a really solid character, and fairly simple to learn. Definitely parts of his kit that are harder to master, but overall I think he's quite simple. In number 17 we have the Hillbilly. Billy is an all-round just okay killer. He is quite tricky to learn, but he has a lot of potential when learnt well. He's got a really solid all-in-one power with his chainsaw. This allows him to insta-down, traverse the map quickly, and cut down space in chase. You even get a little bit of passive pressure with the noise of the chainsaw. Often it can cause survivors to be cautious, as they may worry about you suddenly appearing and running at them out of nowhere. His power is simply, it's a chainsaw. You rev it up, you move forward quickly, and you have restricted movement from side to side, aside the initial ability to make a quick turn when you enter the sprint. The difficulty comes in learning to do things like curve with him. This is particularly tricky on some loops. If you collide with an object, you will get a short stun, and ending a sprint without hitting someone will also cause a short cooldown. Revving too much can overheat the chainsaw, making it briefly inactive. Billy's main weakness, I think, at the moment is the map dependence. This guy can't catch a break when it comes to the newer maps in the game. They are big, and often have lots of strange collision, which is just like the worst for Billy. He ideally needs a lot of space, and clear shots from end to end of the map to make the most of his power. However, he does excel at chasing, and does have the potential to quickly deal with multiple people too. His chainsaw is a pretty all-in-one power and tool, and can do most things. However, you need to learn to use it well. In number 16 we have the Deathslinger. Slinger is a character that to me has largely just been dropping in power as the years have gone on. I think more and more he suffers from newer, larger maps with tougher loops, with strange collision, causing his spear to be hard to hit. He still has undeniable strength in chase though, and is a character that can shut down chases in a few seconds when played well. Slinger's power is his Redeemer, a spear gun that can fire and reel survivors in who are hit with it. Hitting a survivor with the Redeemer after reeling them in will apply deep wounds. If they are injured, it will down them. If the chain is broken whilst reeling, deep wounds will be applied too. However, hitting the chain shot and then breaking free whilst injured will not down them. Slinger does require you to have some decent aim, but I would say it's fairly forgiving. A great positive for him is being able to damage even when you're not able to fully reel someone in, through using the chain break. Slinger's main struggle is his lack of ability to pressure a map, particularly larger ones, and being able to evenly spread pressure, as your power is reliant almost solely on your ability to hit shots. However, he does chases very well, like very, very well. His reload is very quick too, so you can often get back-to-back shots and end chases in seconds. In number 15 we have the Nemesis. Nemesis is a character I struggle with a little, but he has a lot going for him, and he is undoubtedly the best killer in the game at quickly moving through pallets, able to push forward and destroy at the same time. You could say He's a lethal pursuer. Nemesis's main power is his tentacle strike. When a survivor is hit with this, they will become infected, causing them to cough, and they will require a vaccine to become healthy again. When infected, you are able to damage them with your tentacle for a single health state at a time. Each time you apply infection, you tear up your tentacle. You can also tear it up by destroying zombies. The tier 1 base version is rather basic, then tier 2 lets you break pallets and walls, and tier 3 will extend the tentacle reach and increase movement speed when readying the tentacle. Nemesis also has his zombies, which are AI controlled. They will wander around the map and passively pressure survivors. The zombies act the same way as the tentacle, first applying infection and then damaging if infected when attacking survivors. They're also a great information tool, as their auras can be seen, and you can identify the direction they're walking in to find survivors in the area, as they will be drawn to sound, created by things like generators, or if survivors run close by to them. Overall, Nemesis is quite strong, and he has a lot going for him. His main benefit is his great forward momentum, and his tentacle being a generally good damage tool, which is really great especially on tight loops. It's also pretty great for denying strong loops, as it can catch people out on things like window vaults quite easily. His zombies are frustrating and inconsistent, but there's not too much to be done about that. His add-ons are In number 14 we have the Demogorgon. Demo is still my midpoint for my killer rankings, as it's the most balanced and mid killer in the game I find, being solid at everything, without excelling at anything either. It's a character with strong all-round gameplay, and a well-rounded kit. It's a great character to initially learn the game on, due to its kit being very close to regular gameplay, and also having lots of transferable skills from other killers, with things like Shred being an extended lunge essentially. Demo's power is actually its portals. You get 6 in total, and you are able to place them around the map and teleport between them. They can be destroyed, however, if survivors interact with them. They are best used as a map traversal tool, but do have the potential to be used for stealthy approaches too. These portals are pretty average. There's better movement abilities, but Demo's is pretty okay. It can be hard to always set up portals and maintain them properly, but they're still a great tool for map traversal. The main ability you will use though is Shred. This is a fast-moving lunge attack that will jolt you forward, and damage for a health state. This movement is incredibly quick to charge and execute. Missing will give a short cooldown. This is amazing for typically tough loops like Shack, being able to catch people out with relative ease. Any loop with a long wall is a lot less safe. Overall, Demo is really great, and is solid at pretty much everything, having a bit of a wider kit, while still being simple and effective. Its main weakness is really nothing in particular. It's solid all round, which is why I feel it perfectly embodies balance, and is a great character to place at this midpoint. In number 13 we have the Plague. Plague is a really solid character, and has a very solid kit. Plague gains the main benefit of being able to almost completely deny healing within a trial, and makes all survivors loud and constantly injured. Plague's main power is her Vile Purge. This is a stream of vomit that you can charge up and fire out. Hitting a survivor will cause them to become infected, which will progress over time until fully active, where they will be broken and unable to heal. The more vomit you land, the quicker this process is. They can only rid themselves of this effect if they cleanse at a pool of devotion. When a pool is used, you then get the option to absorb the pool, giving you your corrupt purge, the red vomit. This vomit acts as a ranged regular attack, damaging for a singular health state, but will only last a short period of time. You can also infect survivors by vomiting on generators, pallets, and other interactable things. An infected survivor who interacts with a generator will also infect the generator, and then if a healthy survivor were to touch that generator, they too would become infected. Plague's ability is great, as it makes survivors louder and easier to locate. This makes chases far easier, giving you information on their position, but also shortening them simply by the fact that they're injured. When a healthy survivor saves an infected one, they will also become infected. Plague is great, and I think is simple to get the hang of, once you understand how the vomit works as a projectile. She is able to easily wipe a team when they are all injured, and can gain great value from slowdown perks like Thanatophobia. Her main difficulty, I would say, is just managing to infect everyone. It can be a little time consuming to get that initial pressure, and also the vomit projectile is unique, so it can be a little tricky to pick up. It has some strange movement, I would say, and times where it can feel fairly inconsistent. In number 12 we have the Dredge. Dredge is a character with a lot available to it, but it also has quite a few counters, I find, and restrictions, despite having a lot of solid abilities. Dredge is a really weird mess of abilities, to be honest. Its main ability is being able to teleport between lockers. This is kind of hit and miss for effectiveness, because locker placements aren't always the best, and also the survivors have the ability to counter this by bolting the lockers shut, requiring a longer animation to exit them. You can teleport up to 3 times. You can also use this ability as an anti-loop tool. Holding down the ability button will put you into your phase mode, where you cannot damage, but you can move about. Whilst in this mode you can float around, and press your active ability button to return to your remnant, which will spawn wherever you entered your phase to begin with. This makes it good for shutting down loops, as you can bait survivors one way, then go the other, cutting them off very quickly. You do have to be careful though, because if a survivor touches the remnant, then you will be pulled out of your phase. Dredge's final and one of its most powerful abilities is Nightfall. This will slowly charge as the match goes on, and will charge based on injures, hooks, and use of your power. When fully charged, the map will become very dark for the survivors, and they will only be able to see in their immediate proximity. Their hearing will be distorted, and they will become oblivious to your whereabouts as you become undetectable. You'll also get Killer Instinct after teleporting to a locker, when a survivor is within 16 meters of you. Overall, a lot of stuff to its kit. It's a weird mix, and it works pretty well. I find it kind of odd personally, and I struggle sometimes with different elements, but Dredge has a lot going for it. Its add-ons aren't the best, but they are fine. The core kit is where Dredge excels, and the main downsides are the sizable restrictions bolted lockers cause, and random elements to maps like locker placements. Still though, it has an incredibly extensive teleport system, with lockers being in almost every part of the map. In number 11 we have the Huntress. Huntress is a very simplistic killer, but a killer that has a lot of different things to learn. Her power is her hatchets. You throw them, and they damage for a health state. They curve differently, and move at different speeds depending on how long you hold them. You get 5 in total, and can reload at lockers. Huntress is a very solid character, and I think the best ranged character in the game as of now. She is able to down survivors incredibly quickly, due to her throwable basic attacks. She mainly struggles when it comes to longer loops, and maps with too many closed sightlines, like indoor maps. Despite being slow, she has the added pressure of her lullaby, which extends out quite far, and can act as a good system of causing survivors to play more carefully as they hear her approaching. She also has quite a few good add-ons. The main thing with Huntress is learning how her hatchets move and play, and being able to properly control them. Things like learning the wind-up time, things like learning how far they can go, and the different arcs and angles is very important, and in general just learning things like the actual loops and their layouts, as this will allow you to use your power very effectively. In number 10 we have the Twins. Twins still suffer from many cooldowns, making them often feel clunky. The potential they have though is quite high, especially as not many people play them. It means not many people know how to counter them too. Your power is Victor, who you're able to switch to from Charlotte, who plays like a regular killer. Victor, however, is smaller, fast moving, and can leap long distances. He's also very quiet, and only has a low growl to identify his presence. Leaps are very strong, but you do have to be careful with them, as missing one leaves you vulnerable briefly, and able to be kicked by the survivors. Hitting a leap with Victor will down the survivor if they are injured, and if healthy, Victor will attach to them, and inflict the oblivious, broken, and incapacitated statuses, and he'll attach onto them, requiring the survivor to shake him off. Victor, whilst inactive, also provides Killer Instinct when survivors run into his radius, making him a good information tool. even when you're not using him. The twins can be tricky and take a good amount of practice. They aren't really the most accessible character, especially as you are essentially playing two characters here. Learning to use them both to zone survivors and pressure teams will take time. The ability to be in two places at once, and the ability to down and damage quickly with Victor is undeniably strong though. In number 9 we have the Cenobite. Cenobite is a character that has a lot going for him. I think he may be the technically toughest character in the game, with a range of challenging abilities, and elements of his power to learn, which is why I find he isn't quite top tier, despite maybe being one of the stronger characters when played perfectly, because it's very hard to play him perfectly, particularly with the random elements to his power, such as box spawns. Cenobite's primary ability you will be using the most often is his chain shot. This is a chain you can fire out, choosing a point to summon it from. Whilst controlling the chain, you are immobile. If the chain connects to a survivor, 3 chains will spawn and hinder their movement briefly. This is primarily a tool for shutting down loops and catching up during a chase. It's effective as both a counter to running away, but also staying confined, the drawback being its difficulty of use, although it's perfectly learnable over time. Cenobite's main power though is the box. It will spawn within the trial at the start of the match, and your goal is to ideally find it. The box is the item that controls chain hunts. Chain hunts will begin naturally, and will have their progress before they start shown, indicated by the chain's progress around the survivor icons. Once full, chains will begin to spawn constantly, until the box is solved by a survivor, or you find it, moving the box once more, and retaining the chain hunt. Ideally you want to retain the chain hunt. If you solve the box, it reveals the location of all survivors, and the chain hunt persists. If a survivor solves the box, the chain hunt timer is reset, although while solving it, you do get the chance to teleport to their location, auto-completing the box for the survivor, but allowing it to move once more so you have another chance to retrieve it, and also start the chase with the person who solved it. Cenobite can be truly unstoppable when you can consistently maintain a chain hunt. His chain shots, although difficult, are quite strong. Overall, he isn't overly map reliant, nor on perks. The survivors do have the advantage though, of being able to see the box with an aura. You can work the general spawn of the box by working out where you are, where the survivors are, and the furthest point from there is generally where it will be. He has a choice of quite strong add-ons too. If you can learn how to play him, Cenobite is kind of insane. In number 8 we have the Mastermind. Wesker is a character that is one of the stronger ones added more recently. Wesker has a lot going for him. He is great at chasing, and is able to end chases very fast, as well as move around loops quite efficiently. Wesker's power is his bound. He has 2 charges, and can move forward quickly. If he hits a survivor, he will grab them and throw them. This will infect them, and then damage them if they are thrown against an object. When infected, they will have to seek out a first aid spray to cleanse themselves. Infection progresses over time, and will eventually cause the survivor to become hindered, reducing movement speed by 8%, which makes them a lot easier to catch in chase. You will also be able to insta-down them with your bound attack, once they are fully infected. The main benefit of the bound attack is the ability to quickly end chases. You can also use the bounds to vault windows or pallets by dashing toward them, although this ability is rather hit and miss. The infection is more of a secondary benefit as you go too. Wesker is viable on every map, I would say. He has a bunch of strong and worthwhile add-ons, and he is just very effective. You don't need to rely overly on perks. His base kit is very solid. Even the newer loops with slightly odd shapes or collision are not a problem for him. In number 7 we have the Executioner. Pyramid Head is a character that feels built to overcome and bypass all of the survivors' tricks and perks, with his kit allowing him to tunnel extremely well. Pyramid Head's main power is his Trails of Torment. Once placed, these trails will identify any survivor who runs over them with Killer Instinct, also inflicting them with the Torment effect. The only way survivors can move past them is by crouching over them. His secondary ability is his ranged attack, which lets out a shockwave, damaging survivors who enter its path. It has pretty good range and can pierce walls, making it a great tool for shutting down loops and reaching windows or vaults mid-chase. Tormented survivors when downed can be sent to cages instead of hooks. Cages act the same as hooks, only you can send survivors to them instantly, and you cannot see where once you do, with their location only revealed once they are saved. It's a good tool though for time saving and bypassing perks such as Decisive Strike, although it's less common nowadays. If a survivor is on their final hook and tormented, then you can mori them, efficiently removing them from the trial. Overall, Pyramid Head has a lot to his kit, but most of it, despite it maybe initially seeming intimidating, is quite simple to learn, and is very effective. His strengths lie in his ability to bypass meta perks, and generally have very efficient hooking. He's a great character for sharpening your play, and cutting down time loss where necessary. He can be a little map dependent, particularly on some of the newer maps. His add-ons are simplistic but effective. Very solid killer overall. In number 6 we have the Hag. Hag is a character who is incredibly good at holding down an area, with her power being immensely oppressive, particularly when she has her stronger add-ons. Hag's power is her traps. She gets 10 total and can scratch them into the ground on any surface. These traps are triggered when a survivor moves into their proximity. When triggered, a phantasm of the Hag will spawn, blocking off the path. You also get the chance to teleport to the phantasm and take its place, if you are within 40 meters of the triggered trap. If you teleport right away, you can fairly consistently guarantee a hit. The only weakness they have is flashlights, which can destroy them if one is shined on a trap. Survivors can also move past them by crouching over them. Hag's traps can be very scary, able to block off pallets and just deny loops or just escape as a whole. If someone gets in the basement, not good for the survivors. If you get into a 3gen as survivors, not good. Hag is the best at holding an area, debatably even better than characters like Nurse or Spirit. Her speed and ability to injure multiple people in quick succession is crazy. The main thing for her is learning how to place traps, and in general, setting up an area. It can be tricky to initially pick up, but I find most Hags can be successful, particularly with perks centered around passive gen regression and healing slowdown. Hag isn't that map reliant, as she can set up a 3gen on most maps and hold it effectively. Similar to Twins, Hags also don't appear too often, so when they do, I think most teams have a tough time countering her. In number 5 we have the Artist. The Artist is a character with a lot of potential, and a character that is able to perform well on most maps, and due to her ability to identify survivors from almost anywhere on the map, from any position. Artist's power is her dire crows. She has 3 in total, and can fire them. The crows can fire through walls, and will go straight on forever. If they hit a survivor, they will swarm them, revealing their position, and briefly showing an aura when the survivor begins to swat them away. If a swarm survivor is hit again with a crow, they will be damaged. You can also instantly apply damage if a survivor is hit and within the crow's highlighted flight path, which you can see with its white aura when you place it. Aside damage, her crows are a great tool for information, able to be fired to multiple generators at once, checking on them. Even if you don't hit a swarm, you can identify presence too by the killer instinct that will trigger if a crow passes close by a survivor. Her power is amazing at denying loops as a whole, but is especially useful due to her being able to shut down stronger loops in the game like Shack. You can spawn crows quite quickly too, which means you can get quick hits on many vaults and loops. In theory, you can down almost anyone from almost any point on the map. She struggles sometimes on maps that are multi-leveled, but mostly she can perform well almost anywhere. I think she's also a lot easier to pick up over some of these higher characters. In number 4 we have the Oni. Oni is a character that I'm placing maybe a little higher than expected, as I think he's a far easier character to both learn and master than some of these other higher characters. He's still very strong, and can wipe teams very quickly with his power, and he's also pretty simple whilst doing so. His power is his Blood Fury. You gain your power by injuring survivors and absorbing the blood that they drop. Once attained, your power allows you to run quickly, insta-down with your slam attack, and generally just cause a lot of chaos. His power is relatively simple, and the main thing to overcome with it is the early game build-up, as it basically requires that you get multiple hits before being able to use it. But once people begin becoming injured, and you get into the momentum, it becomes pretty much unstoppable. There are many tricks with his dash and slam abilities, and they are fairly easy to learn due to their forgiving nature, and the fact that you can run right into objects without suffering stuns of any kind. Oni can be very, very strong. He's not all too map reliant, he has some good add-ons to use, and his power allows him to quickly end chases, snowball games, and keep control of a map with relative ease. In number 3 we have the Spirit. Spirit I actually don't think is so great anymore, however she still has undeniable strengths. I'm not a personal fan of her, but I think this number 3 spot is about where she should be still. She gets a huge benefit from her power, allowing her to shut down chases extremely quickly, with little ability for the survivors to counter her, as during her phase she is completely invisible, with her main counter being an often tricky to identify directional sound cue, which for a lot of people can be quite hard to identify. Her power is her phase ability. When phasing, you are invisible to survivors, but you also can't see survivors yourself. You can however hear them and see their scratch marks, and you're able to track them with sound primarily, but also with environmental cues, like dropped pallets or moving grass. This power is strong, as it's hard for survivors to predict movement when they can't see you. You're also a bit quicker when phasing, making the ability a decent map traversal tool, although it should be used sparingly this way. Spirit has issues in her accessibility for some players too. Having a headset is kind of a requirement for Spirit, and it's required to be very aware of sounds and your environment. There's further struggle for newer players, I think, when it comes to knowledge of survivor movement. Spirit is still very strong though. She is still very hard to counter, and a lot of the time it's still just guesswork. In number 2 we have the Blight. Blight is a character with a ton of potential, but definitely one of the more technically complex characters currently in the game. There's lots to learn with Blight, and much of it comes in the form of strange techs that often shift and move as time goes by. Blight's main power is his rushes. He gets 5 at base. You initially rush, which is a movement ability, until you collide with an object. The second rush is a lethal one, and you are able to sprint at a survivor and swing your cane to damage them. You can rush up to 5 times, seen by the 5 tokens. Each rush consumes 1 token. You can use the environment to extend your rush, and also adjust your position to be preferable. This power is great for both its speed, but also accuracy. You're able to bounce and become more accurate, whilst moving around loops, and doing so very quickly. This makes most loops possible to shut down with relative ease. Blight has a very powerful ability. He can move quickly across the map, pressure survivors easily, and he can quickly end chases. He further has access to multiple strong add-ons that buff him even further. Blight, however, is quite difficult to learn, but it's a situation where I think it's quite doable too. Maybe you won't be able to pick up all the techs and stuff, but even learning his main power, in that state alone, he is still strong. In number 1 we have the Nurse. The Nurse is still the strongest killer in the game, and it's not really that close to be honest. Nurse is a character who breaks all the rules. She practically doesn't have a weakness. She has quick map traversal, the ability to quickly chase and down survivors, and may not be able to pressure multiple people at once, but she can move between them so quickly that she basically can. Her power is her blinks. She has 2 blinks, and each one phases her forward depending on how long it is held. After blinking, there is a short window to swing and hit a survivor. You are able to blink through walls and up and down different floors. This is all she has, but it's a pretty all-encompassing power that allows her to do almost anything, with only a few small cooldowns after blinking and when regaining her charges. She's further strong with the fact that perk effects are applied with her blink attacks, as well as her add-ons further increasing her power. Maps don't matter all that much for her, as she can ignore all obstacles essentially. Nurse can be hard to learn for some people, but I think everyone is capable of learning her and performing well when given time. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your own ranking down below. Thanks, and goodbye.